here is Greg Gutfeld on the 5 talking about the Indiana mall shooting, which ended in somebody who was in the mall who had their own gun who shot the shooter. And as soon as I saw that, I understood that this was going to be a way for conservatives to push their whole good guy with a gun fantasy, where everybody is Rambo, and as soon as the villain comes in, bang, shoot him dead. Which is interesting because that is seeding the point that, like, the shots already have to ring out for this to be the case. Somebody's gonna die, but that's the price of freedom, right? We're as long as you have like a mitigating good guy with a gun, they're going to be able to fix our society, even though it's like completely disproven by Uvalde when we had 400 good guys with guns and they did nothing.
Even in this situation, it's like, what more do you want? We shot the guy. It was like, how about he wasn't able to shoot anybody in the first place?
Right. But they're okay with that being the a certain amount of bloodshed, but the good guy will stop him before there's more bloodshed. Certain amount of bloodshed's good with us.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's also important to point out, and I think you might have already, that just doesn't happen, statistically speaking. Like, that there's like a good guy with a gun very rarely is the one to stop a bad guy with a gun, especially if that good guy with a gun is not a police officer.
As proven by reality, like we've seen.
Reality. And so the bad guys with guns who roam our streets are a reality. The good guys with guns are a fantasy, which is the funny part.
Yes. And here is Gutfeld making that case in as convoluted of a way as is humanly possible. Brace yourselves.
Double the maximum pistol range distance. Nobody else could do that. They said they don't even come close. So I think, one, hero. Also, would you please join the Navy SEALs?
It's a good shot, that's for sure. Greg Gutfeld. Well, Jessica brought up the news cycle, and she's right about how one side goes with their story and another side brings up their story. But the problem is that other story, the Texas story and all the other mass shootings, get massively amplified. This story must be amplified because it's clear.
Yeah.
What about because, like, the bodies of children?
Because of the 19 children that were massacred.
Or like Las Vegas, just like dozens and dozens and dozens of people shot from a hotel that you can't look at the same anymore after that. Like a good guy trying to get into that hallway was like just ridiculous. Like, yeah, there's a reason that the ones where more bodies hit the floor is amplified.
Also, there are just more of them than there are good guys with guns.
Yes.
That was a copycat shooter. Right? These are all happening in clumps because the amplification of the previous shootings. So it stands to reason if you were to amplify this story, that would give copycats, a second thought, right? It's like the uncertainty that there might be an armed person around there in the place that you want to go light up. It might take you out. That might help. So more of these stories I would love to hear, and I'd love to hear
I'm
them
sorry, pause it again.
In the media, but I doubt.
Yeah, oftentimes shooters understand that they're going to die when they commit those shootings. Very, very
That's
often.
How they're doing suicide.
If they don't kill themselves. Is that not the case with the Columbine shooters? They killed themselves.
Once they were finished, they walked into a room and they both shot themselves.
Yeah, so death is not a deterrent for this. And at the same time, they're trying to make a claim that this is mental health only, right? And we don't support any mental health funding, but this is just a broadly mental health.
Right, I mean, that's the short circuit. Like, okay, we'll latch on to that. Let's do a federal mental health program. No, we're not going to do that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess I agree. Every day in America, when there are on average like 2 mass shootings, Greg Gutfeld should report on those 2 mass shootings where a good guy with a gun did not save anybody. And then he should bring up this story again that will have happened a while in the past by, any point in time, really, where like it did happen that one time, though. So we got to keep having bad guys with guns shooting to give the good guys a chance to like make more of these stories.
Yeah.
And if you were to amplify this story, that would give copycats, a second thought, right? It's like the uncertainty that there might be an armed person around there in the place that you want to go light up. and might take you out. That might help. So more of these stories I would love to hear, and I'd love to hear them, in the media, but I doubt that this is showing up on CNN or MSNBC. Gun control zealots will say permit to carry doesn't reduce incidents of mass shootings. Well, this one didn't reduce the incident. It reduced the severity. What does that sound like? Vaccines, right? Think of this like a vaccine. The permit to carry didn't prevent the contagion, right? But it diminished the harm dramatically. So you're gonna say you don't want it now. This is, and it goes back to the Sunny.
It's actually not applicable at all. It's much more like getting COVID. The way to combat COVID is more COVID. So in a roundabout way, he's making a herd immunity case.
It is one of the most awesome galaxy brain Gutfeldian metaphors I've seen in such a long time. I'm so pleased with it.
Herd immunity for gun violence.
It's just amazing. For the
no, go ahead.
I was going to say, just for the sheer complexity of it, I'm going to give him a pass on that one. He took us to the logic octagon, and he made me tap out with just the technical proficiency in which he spewed that one. Just he was very proud of. What can you say to that? What can you say to that argument? It's so flawed. I don't even know where to begin.
I think it's really interesting how, in order to pump up this good guy with a gun in this one specific case, they needed to talk about how amazing, how far he shot his handgun from, and the accuracy, and all these things that truly point out what a unique case this was. This is not something that can be easily replicated. First of all, this guy likely was a great shot, apparently, if he was able to. I don't remember how many yards. I remember seeing maybe 40 yards away with a handgun shoot this active shooter. Kudos to him for having that skill. But he was also shooting in a public space, which meant all that time and room in between, that 40-yard space, for someone to walk in between his shot or run between his shot, and for him to have accidentally killed or maimed an innocent bystander. Not only was skill involved here, but pure luck. Everything came together for this good Samaritan, this good guy with a gun, and that's why this situation unfolded the way that it did. And they bring this up because they want to talk about how awesome this guy was, without realizing that it directly goes against the point they want to make, that we can just recreate this scenario, give all these good guys, quote unquote, guns, and this same thing will play out the same exact way each and every time. This was an aberration. This will not play out any other time like this the same exact way. In fact, the more likely scenario is that good guy with the gun accidentally shoots someone else, or the cops show up and shoot the good guy with the gun because that's the person they see with the gun. There are so many ways this could have gone wrong that makes this situation truly unique, that it unraveled the way that it did.
Yeah, Binder, just to your point there from this Times piece about the Indiana shooting, the guy's name, the Good Samaritan's name, was Eli Dickin, and it says, but Mr. Dickin's act, though heroic, was also a statistical unicorn. An examination of 433 active shooter attacks in the United States between 2000 and 2021 showed that only 22 ended with a bystander shooting an attacker. That's
because the liberal media is suppressing this knowledge.
In 10 of those cases, the armed bystander was a security guard or off-duty law enforcement officer. In other encounters, civilians attempting to step in and stop an assailant were themselves shot to death by the police.
Of course, because how do you discern in that moment if everybody's armed and they're shooting? They're going to shoot the guy with the gun, but how do you know that if you're in a mall, there's a lot of people with guns in this situation? How do you know that's the guy who's doing the shooting?
Well, that's reality. And I think that's the important part to emphasize, that that's just the reality of these shootings. And so, to Matt's point, it would be very difficult for this to happen again in reality based on the facts we know to be true. But where it's easy for it to happen again is in the heads of people who like to pretend that this is going to be them. It's very easy for people to imagine that they're going to be the good guy with a gun who's shooting, all bullseye from across the mall and taking down the bad guys, like an old Tom Clancy novel. When when in reality, it's not going to happen. But what does happen is that we have to have all of these mass shootings around for people to have those fantasies. And I think that that's like the real, the real cost of this, of the gun violence, is that we are all just subject to being part of like these right wingers, like home defense fantasies. Like there's this idea that they're going to be a hero. And then when the time comes, they're running away. There are 400 cops outside the school with one shooter. And it's like, oh, well, that was an aberration. That doesn't happen all the time, but the statistics don't bear it to be true.
Also, can't imagine that like if there's a bunch of armed people in a mall and there are different racial groups, that there might be some bias in terms of who they're going to shoot, which is who are the people with guns.
Oh, I was just about to say, if you have all these people in one public space, all armed, in their mind, like Fox News and other conservative outlets would like them to be thinking, where they're going to be the good guy with the gun at any moment and be the hero, what you're going to end up having is like the most fucked up version of the movie The Raid imaginable, where you have like one good guy with a gun shooting the shooter, and then good guy number 2 seeing good guy number 1 and shooting him, thinking he was the shooter, and then good guy number 3 jumping behind the bush, shooting good guy number 2, thinking he was the shooter, and on and on and on until you have like 99 good guys with guns laying wasted out on the floor because good guy 100 was the last person to see someone with a gun.
Except,
it's the SNL skit where they make fun of the OC shooting. But keep going.
I mean, like, that is a very funny imagining thing, or rather a thing to imagine. But like, I think in reality, what it really does is encourage a bunch of people to carry a gun with them everywhere they go, which just increases the amount of altercations that happen between not mass shooters and good guys with guns, but just two people with guns in the street. How many mass shootings in America start as like a fight at a bar or a fight at a party where, two people happen to be armed and they start shooting at each other, as opposed to not doing those things. And so really the danger of this narrative is not that we're going to have a bunch of like good guys with guns like shooting each other in a line. If only, it's just going to be like you'll be at the movie theater and a guy will bump into another guy and get soda on his shoes, and one of them will be a little drunk, and then they'll start shooting at each other. Like that's what the reality of everyone being armed is. And the idea that like, well, that just never happens, but it sure as hell happens more than good guys with guns stopping mass shootings.
Yeah, and like the fact that, I mean, they lean so hard into this in like a society where we're only allowed to feel empowered as consumers, and this is just like another way to purchase something that's going to make you feel like you have like a dick in society that wants to constantly disempower you. It really is just totally chilling.
And before we move on, I just want to express like, no uncertain terms too, as some people in the chat have said this as well. 3 people besides the shooters still died. They were still murdered. They were still killed by that man, despite the good guy with the gun. Even though Gutfeld is saying this is making the severity less, the contagion, even though the contagion still exists, the contagion that still exists is the only way for the good guy with the gun to be deployed is for the bad guy with the gun to start shooting first.
Yep.
Yeah, this isn't gonna deter anything. In fact, the whole point in a lot of these cases is to run up those numbers, imagining the praise they'll get online after they die or they're arrested. Where a bunch of incels are talking about, oh, this is the new record, 50 people killed at the latest shooting. That guy is awesome, because that's what goes on in these forums and image boards. So they're probably gonna just look at this and think of, oh, we got to remember this scenario when we carry out our next horrible act, because we've got to run up those numbers. We don't want ours to get, we don't want our run to get ended too quickly. They're not going to worry about anything else but that, not their lives, because the whole point of this is to kill as many before they get killed or arrested.
I think the key here is kind of like Emma was saying, this is like a consumer problem too, where like, Americans are very conditioned to think of themselves as hyper rational, hyper competent consumers. So they go like, not only do I buy this gun and I'm a big guy, but suddenly I become an expert in gun usage. I become an expert crack shot without practice. I become, expert in gun safety. They start doing the RoboCop like spin thing with with the gun at home and shoot themselves in the dick. But for me, I just think, every gun owner should be forced to learn gun kata from Equilibrium. And that would really shut down on the amount of mass shootings, and especially amount of like mass shootings that are a result of people being accidentally shot in crossfire. If everyone knew how to like angle the bullets in like really advanced ways, who had a gun, we could really just make sure that only the intended targets were killed. And then when a good guy with a gun came in, they would be even more skilled with their, gun kata, I would imagine, because they would be acting in the side of good if the movie is any indication.
Yeah. Did you want to say something, Matt?
Oh, how many deaths from guns South Korea had in 2019? 10. That's 51 million people.